Megan Wood and Matt Doocey, good morning to you both.
Morning, Chris. Morning, Matt.
Morning, Megan.
I remember the good old days of the Green Party when it was the likes of the late Rod Donalds and Jeanette Fitzsimons, but now it seems to be a basket case. Let's get into this, because given Green MP Tabitha Paul's discussion about radical police abolition, Megan, I'll start with you because I could be a potential coalition partner. Do you think the Green Party's stance on this poses a risk to public confidence in our justice system?
No, and I think we need to be careful not to catastrophise that. We don't agree with Tabitha. We think actually that communities want to see more police, not fewer. But I don't think that we need to go as far as to say that it's going to erode public confidence in the police. I think you've seen just about every other political party come out and disagree with her, and that's fine. We're all different parties in Parliament. We're not going to agree with anything with everyone on everything. Otherwise, we'd be just one big political party.
Matt, what do you say? Matt, can you hear me?
Yes, it's quite faint there, Chris, but I'm hearing you now. Sorry about that. Yeah, look, it's quite concerning to hear from an elected representative. This is an electorate Green MP from Wellington. Quite disheartening comments about our police force, our hardworking police men and women who are on the front line every day, putting themselves at risk to keep us safe. And not only is it very far left activism comments, it's also unsubstantiated examples that she is giving. And in fact, even recently, some of the local Wellington community organisations that she is trying to reference to back up her stories have distanced themselves and don't substantiate what she is saying. So, look, it's really concerning. And actually, when you start looking at potentially coalition partners, then it does start worrying people what a left coalition government will bring in if we're starting to talk about not having police on the beat. And even it's not uncommon for Green MPs to be wearing T-shirts to say they want to get rid of prisons. I mean, this is a pathway to anarchy.
So, Chris, just a couple of things on that.
It isn't a good look, though, is it, Megan? I mean, as I say, the Green Party of yesteryear that was involved and wanted to save the planet and was really into the environmental needs of New Zealanders and the planet, it has really deviated, though, hasn't it? And it does seem the Green Party is now the party of radicals.
Oh, look, I mean, I think if we keep to the issue in hand, we've been really clear, and Chris has been crystal clear on this. We don't agree with her on this. That it's not something that we would agree with at all, and that is the case with coalition partners. And I think Matt will just need to take stock of some of the things his coalition partners have said and whether or not they agree with everything that they say as well. But I think what we in Labour think is actually people do feel more confident when there are more police on the beat, and we absolutely back that. Of concern to us, of course, is that we've only seen in the entire time this government has been in place 13 additional police added in that time. That's come out this week, that there's been a whole lot of chest beating and things that are going to happen. But when the numbers come out, Mark Litchell's had to stand up and defend the fact that in that entire time they've been in government, despite all the strong words on the campaign trail, we've seen 13 additional police added. What's the target? I think it's about 500 by the end of this year. So there's a bit of a sprint to the finish. You've still got 480 odd police to add between now and the end of the year when you've only managed 13 additional police over the 18 months you've really been in government. So I think if we take this back to what do we need to do to keep our communities safe, and for me, that is the most important thing. And I know that what we're seeing actually is less time of our community constables in a lot of our neighbourhoods here in Christchurch because they're being transferred out of the suburbs into the city. Now, I've got no problem with police going on the beat in the city, but let's add additional police and not take them out of the suburbs like the suburbs I represent, because that's what we've seen. So I think let's have the debate about that and whether or not National can actually fulfil the promises that they make a big deal of during the campaign.
But Megan, I think that's a welcome distraction for the Labour Party to say, let's have a debate about this, but let's have a debate about what principles the Green parties are standing on, because when you look at the voting record this term, The Labour Party and the Green Party have voted in lockstep, opposing every law and order legislative house. Let's be off the point to one bill that you voted different than the Green Party. They've opposed every law and order bill we've put in the House. So they are in lockstep where this is going. Hugely concerned.
No, that's not true.
And what
Matt.
it says to those brave policemen and women on the front line is they are not respected by the opposition. And I think that's very disconcerting considering the challenges the police have been through, especially in the last few months.
Okay, Megan?
Matt, I think what you're doing is you're reading off your lines that you've been given by the media unit rather than engaging in the debate. What I'm saying is we do not agree with
Chris Lynch has
No, I think that's coming straight from National Party HQ, Matt. What we've said,
this term means.
No, Matt, if you actually listen to the conversation you and I are having here, I am not disagreeing with you in saying that what Tamitha said was wrong, not defending it. Chris Hipkins has been incredibly strong on that. We're saying we want to see more police, not fewer. We're dismayed that we've only seen 13 added. We absolutely appreciate the work that the police do in our communities, and that's why we added more when we were in government. I want to see this government fulfil the promises it made to the electorate at the campaign and get going and add more than 13 police over 18 months. Not good enough. So let's not say the opposition is disrespecting the police. Labour has been crystal clear in the fact that we back our police and we want to see more of them.
Okay,
But what has been undeniable is the Labour and the Greens are lockstep in their voting record this term against law and order bills that the coalition are putting forward to keep the community safe.
Nonsense.
Well, yesterday or the day before yesterday, the government announced more measures to get tougher on crime, with various restrictions when it comes to discounts won't be able to get as many discounts. Did you support that, Megan? Did Labour support that?
Is that the sentencing discounts?
Yeah.
Look, I'm not the justice spokesperson. I'm not sure where we're there. But what we have
Labour is did the Greens.
Yeah. No, but Chris, one of the things that I think, Mac, maybe we could have one person at a time. I think one of the things that you look at what Ginny Edison said this week in terms of the gag patch stuff, that we've been really clear that maybe that has rolled out better than we thought. It's not something we'd necessarily turn around. So I think you can see that Labour is absolutely interested in what works and using an evidence base around this. So I think Matt's trying to tell Labour what it thinks, but I think it's really important that we have a sensible and adult discussion about this.
Do you agree then with another Green MP, Kahurangi Carter's claim, Megan, that some New Zealanders feel safer around gang members than police? And what message does that send to frontline officers? Now, look, to be fair, she may have a point. There may be gang families that feel safer among their own families who are gang members. Still, it doesn't send the best message to our frontline men and women, does it?
Well, I mean, I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Chris. I think each of us probably feel safer with our families than with strangers often, and that's going to be the same for family members that have gang members in them. I think what we see through modern policing is actually police that make a huge effort to get to know their communities. I know that the community constables that we have here in Wigram, they get to know everybody in the community and that they can call in and they can see them, and I think that makes a huge difference. And I think what we always have is if people aren't being treated by the police, is that there's really clear processes you can go through as that. And as an electorate MP, you do deal with people coming into your office all the time, not happy with the treatment they've got from the police, as you do with any other organisation. And there's really clear processes that you can direct them to if that is the case, because I can't think we can say the police get things 100% right all the time. And that's exactly why we have the independent police complaints authority and process set up for people to do that.
Matt, doesn't this though also point to, once again, the Greens' radicalisation of their MPs, once again saying stuff that down the police?
Well, I think you're right, and it's not uncommon for the Green activist MPs to be posting pictures of them with gang members on their social media. And this is hugely concerning because I think most of the public would expect our Green MPs to be primarily talking about the environment. And, I pose the question, when have you last heard about a Green MP talking about the environment? But this is the problem with the radical left and the challenging of the institutions in New Zealand which keep us safe. And I think we are starting to see the undermining of that, which is hugely concerning going forward.
Bring back then.
Of course, the fashion of politicians being photographed with gang members started with Rob Muldoon, famously. That he was probably the first to start getting photographed with gang members. But I'm actually going to say, I think that if you want to talk about the Greens and where they are, I think you need to have the Greens on to have this conversation as well. I don't think it's for Matt to sit there and say what they should be talking about any more than I think the Greens should say what are the parameters of what a national party should talk about. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a discussion that should be had there.
Well, I disagree, Megan. I think what we're talking about here is an environmental party that's been hijacked by a radical left, and that poses the question:
the Greens have always talked
future
about
left coalition government, whether a future left coalition government will equally be hijacked by the radical left too.
Let's discuss the redirection of these $70 million public funds, transport funds. Matt, you first on this. Given the significance of this public transport futures program for Christchurch's long-term plan, there is some concern both on the political right and left that the council made this decision to abandon its original bid in favour of this low-cost version, and there are some concerns as to why they didn't consult with the so-called Greater Christchurch Partnership to make sure they could get the funds. What's your take on this?
Yeah, look, I don't have an issue with them not continuing with the detailed business case. So if we take a step back, this was about Michael Wood, the Transport Minister, coming in with a bit of pork barrel politics before the last election, announcing $100 million for public transport, very untargeted, as was most announcements by the last government, straddling us with record debt. And the current council has not pursued that, and that's why we've told the councils to get back to basics. We've reprioritised the money. I think most people would expect that money to go towards the best value, and it's making a real difference with Pages Road and Brown Street, and I think most people welcome that.
Megan, is that actually a good point that despite the fact the council didn't know what the government of the day, being the national government, what they were going to do with this funds, they pulled back, and then at least now it's targeted and it's a win for, something that you were campaigning strongly for, the Brown Street upgrades and the overbridge. So is that, can we flip this around and think it's a better thing? At least we've got targeted money going to targeted projects. What's your take on this, Megan?
So I don't think Christchurch getting half of what it could have is ever a good thing. And that's the situation that we've ended up in. For Matt to say that that was untargeted funding is absolute nonsense. It was very clear what it was for. It was for the transport infrastructure. So improving that so that we could have a better public transport system in Christchurch, as well as the operations. Now, both these projects were funded under Labour. I think that's the critical thing. Brom Street was funded, and public transport futures, improving our public transport system, were funded under Labour. The money for the public transport was put into something we called a tagged contingency, and that is standard practice. That said, go away and finish the business case, and once everybody agrees on how the money is going to be spent, the money will be released and you can do it. What happened when there was a change of government is council could not get any clarity out of the minister, out of the government, out of the local national MPs around what was happening with that money. They were led to believe that the money didn't exist. So that's why they pulled back and did the lesser business case. You fast forward and you have you had the Transport Minister and the Prime Minister coming down and saying that Christchurch should be grateful because they're going to reinstate funding for Brom Street, which Labour had already put in place and National had cut, and were not upfront and transparent in telling us that actually all they were doing was taking money that should have been used for something else in Christchurch. I'm absolutely thrilled that National seen how ridiculous the decision was to cut the Brom Street Street upgrade and have put more money into it. But it should not come at the expense of public transport funding. It is classic robbing Peter to pay Paul.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Matt, is this robbing Peter to pay for Paul when Paul's already being paid for in the first place?
Well, what's robbing Peter to pay Paul is saddling New Zealanders with record debt. Will pay $9 billion this year on servicing the interest of that debt alone nationally. We came into power with a mandate of getting our councils back to basics, of getting them back to the priorities of what they're...
What's more basic than roads, Matt? What's more basic than roads and buses?
That's why we are delivering 2 pieces of vital roading infrastructure that you were unable to do, Megan, in 6 years of government. And also,
we still want to talk about started, Matt.
You just talked about having one person talking, and then you want to talk about transport futures. Megan stood on a platform in 2017 of bringing rail in from Rolleston. In 6 years, that didn't happen. Yet we seem to think that we could just announce money and announcements and things will magically happen. This has been reprioritised to 2 priorities that people in Christchurch want, and that's why I support it.
So that money isn't going to the Pages Road Bridge, Matt. What the minister has said is the Ashburton Bridge. And I'm really concerned that what we're having is a Christchurch-based minister, the only one who sits around the cabinet table, who's saying that Christchurch should miss out, that we've got to worry about how much we're borrowing. Get in there and fight for what Christchurch should get. We are not getting our fair share, and no one in this government is sitting around the cabinet table and saying this is not on. Brom Street funding was cut and it was applied to the North Island. We're now having to give up on projects that were already happening and paid for in Christchurch in order to get it back. And we don't even have a minister sitting at the cabinet table that is going to stand up for Christchurch and say we need our fair share, because Christchurch and the South Island is missing out under national. Of the roads of national significance, there's 2 in the South Island. All the rest are in the North Island. It's about time someone put the South Island case, because we're not seeing it under this government.
I would say to that, Megan, that the 2 roads of national significance we're building in the South Island is 2 more than the last Labour government in 6 years.
How many in the North Island, Matt? How many in the North Island?
If you want to talk to Christchurch City Council what extra funding they've got from this national government, they've got $90 million for roading extra from this national government. So you can step through it. When you look at the percentage of land transport funding for Canterbury, it's higher than under the last Labour government. So look, you had 6 years, Megan, to do this. We're getting on and doing it.
Right. And it started, Matt, and you guys cut it.
Need to move on. Matt, the government is pushing to introduce a new role, I suppose, with the mental health crisis in this country, which would be things like associate psychologist, not a psychologist, but associate. So obviously one down from that role with significantly reduced training, instead of expanding funding and placements for properly trained psychologists, as some have suggested. So what safeguards will be in place to ensure that vulnerable New Zealanders aren't misled or put at risk by unqualified practitioners using the protected title psychologist?
Yeah, and look, it's a good question and it's quite topical at the moment, Chris. Look, I would challenge some of the statements that you're saying, and I think you're accurately repeating what has been said in the media. Look, when you say unqualified, associate psychologists would have spent 4 years by the time they enter the workforce studying theory and practice at our tertiary institutions as well. Look, the associate psychologist role is set up to support, not replace, clinical psychologists. They'll work under supervision of clinical psychology, and also they will work in a very defined scope of practice, like all registered mental health professionals do. They will be registered and under the HPCA as well. Look, you raise a good proposition on why aren't we funding more into clinical psychologists, and we are. We put out New Zealand's first standalone mental health and addiction workforce plan last year, that we are going to double the amount of clinical psychologist internship placements as well. So For me, as New Zealand's first mental health minister with a plan for workforce, it's not one or the other. It's actually both. But look, I get it. Change is difficult. When this role was established in the UK, there was similar reservations as well. Some clinical psychologists were concerned about it, but actually when you look at the experience of the United Kingdom, in fact, the clinical psychologists now say they couldn't do without associate psychologists. You see this in other professions as new registrations are developed as well. It's supported by the Psychology Board, Health New Zealand, 2-3 providers. I'm really excited. These students, I've met some of them, will hit the campus in 2026, hit the workforce in 2027. And the last thing I'd say, Chris, is the issue here is we've got over 1,000 people who graduate after 3 years with an undergraduate psychology degree. When they don't get one of those clinical psychology places, they disappear. The data shows that. This is a new registration with a postgraduate diploma to get them into the workforce to support clinical psychology.
Okay. Megan, does Labour support this new role?
And look, this isn't a discussion that we've had as a caucus yet. I think as with anything, you've got to make sure you're doing it well and you're doing it carefully, and you've got to work with the profession. This is not something you can afford to get wrong. This isn't, putting the wrong wire in the wrong place on something. This is about working with some of our most vulnerable members of the community who are going through crises. So we've got to make sure we're doing it well and we're doing it right. And I think also listening to the concerns of the professions, that yes, we do have 1,000 graduates in psychology. Matt's identified, I think, which is one of the critical things, that we also have to be putting resource into making sure that there are more places for clinical placement and for the 7-year qualification for someone who is a full psychologist. Absolutely. That's also work that we had underway. So I think that's something that we can agree on, which is a good thing, because I think we know that anything that we want to do to improve mental health services in New Zealand, that the first obstacle that any government runs up against is workforce and the ability and availability of people to do it. So I will have a conversation as a caucus, but just as with anything, it's got to be done well and it's got to be done carefully and right.
Megan Woods and Matt Doocey, thank you very much for a spirited discussion. Have a lovely weekend, you two.
You too. Thank you.